Peggy, there's a lot of concern, a number of questions here about Reg FD, fair disclosure. And I know that, and I've heard you talk before on this issue, that when you first at Pfizer started thinking about doing this meeting, there was a lot of negative reaction. A lot of the outside advisors suggested no, and in fact, one went quite public.
Governance run amok.
Governance run amok is what Marty Lipton called the Pfizer experiment. So can maybe you and Peggy, you and Lizanne can just talk briefly a little more about regulation FD, fair disclosure, and how you work with that, not around it.
Well, certainly, I think most of you are familiar what Regulation FD is, but in summary, it's essentially you can't give material non-public information to your investors, and those in the rooms are investors. So when you're dealing with strategy, when you're dealing with any business issues, financial, those all have a possibility of going under material non-public information. I think Lizanne said something that we did at Pfizer, which is it was really more for directors to listen. And we did do Reg FD preparation. We did do various materials for the board. The directors that were attending, we did tell them what they should say and what they shouldn't say, but to be honest with you, they knew. I talked to every investor that was coming and explained to them that, that it was listening and there's certain questions you can't ask. And I have to let you know, no one asks those types of questions. They know that if you want to ask a financial question, you talk to the CFO, and the CFO, of course, is trained. You know, investors talk to management all the time, and management knows which questions they can ask and which questions they can't ask with FD. And the same is true with the board members. First, it wasn't the whole board. As you were saying, it was the chairs and it was the lead director and the CEO was present. And so they really were talking about more process, CD&A, performance measures, the types of disclosures, things like say on pay, whether it makes sense, whether it doesn't, access to the proxy. These are not things that are material non-public information. So the answer is, theoretically, that could be a problem. But it is, in all the years that I was doing governance, I can't think of a governance investor, as opposed to an analyst, that really has asked that question.
I think the point we need to stress, and I'll make this very quick, is the bulk of this desire for shareholder communication is so that the shareholders can communicate. They want to be listened to, and they want to know that the board, in fact, is willing to listen. So Peggy and I are in utter agreement on this, that about 90% of your mission, if you elect to do this and if the circumstances are right, will be for you to be a listener, and FD has nothing to say about that. On the remaining 10%, the watchwords are be well trained, have somebody else in the room who's helping you listen to make sure that if you have stepped out of bounds, that you can cure it from an FD perspective. And I think if you follow those two things, FD should not be viewed as the barrier it once was viewed as.
Rich, I would say that in my meetings with shareholders, it was not 90% listening and 10% whatever. There was a free exchange, and we might have been 50-50, and that was no matter what group I was meeting with. I think they really wanted to know how we got to the decisions that we were making and what those decisions were, and they were public. But the fact of the matter is we had exchanges, and I found it very useful.
But you never experienced any of the
They all understood. They all understood FD.
I think that